Tweet of the week goes to Jack Cunningham, who said, could you make a video that answers every question, in all caps, you have in the intro? Would be interesting. It would be interesting, and it would also be like a 7-hour video that would effectively shut down my channel because then I would have answered all of the questions. This week on Stuff Mom Never Told You, I kick things off on Monday with how to finish what you start. That will hopefully help everybody who has asked me for tips on beating procrastination. On Wednesday, I tackled a question from one of you lovely Ask Cristen viewers about why girls wear earrings, and it's super fascinating, so watch it if you haven't watched it. Finally, and most controversially, on Friday, I made a response video to something called the Hot Crazy Matrix, which I don't even have words. Well, I had words, and I made it into a video. I have a feeling that the #1 criticism to the video I make is gonna be, oh, but it's just a joke. You can't take a joke. You know what I'm tired of? People using, oh, but it's just a joke as an excuse for poor behavior or just bad, bigoted comedy. But now on to Ask Cristen. Thanks to everybody who watched and commented on last week's Ask Cristen video, why do girls have neater handwriting? There was so much left-handed pride being rocked in the comments. All right, Southpaws, unite. Yes, this is our symbol, and we are proud. Thanks to all of the Norwegian viewers who I didn't even know there were so many of you watching who gave me a translation for I don't know, which apparently is Jeg vet ikke. Am I saying that anywhere close to correctly? I also really enjoyed how many guys in the comments raised their hand and said, hey, I'm a dude and I have super neat handwriting, and how many ladies raised their hands and said, oh hey, I have super sloppy handwriting. Rock on with your non-gender normative penmanship. Nuri Gamara says, I teach English in Korea to different ages and levels, and while I have noticed that some girls have developed beautiful handwriting in English, the boys are not far behind. For the younger kids just learning how to write in English, I try my best not to have any gender bias and encourage boys and girls to make their letters as neatly as possible. And it seems like that non-gender bias shows on the page. So well done, Nuria. Brittany Howard also observed, I remember cliques of girls in 2nd or 3rd grade consciously trying to mimic each other's handwriting. One girl had really round, bubbly letters, and I guess one of her friends thought that was pretty, and next thing you know, there were 6 girls in the class with nearly identical penmanship. So there was some peer pressure at work, at least in our class. Ooh, peer pressure and penmanship. On to this week's Ask Cristen question, which was by far the most upvoted question in the comments. So remember that, folks, if you want me to answer a question, upvote it. I'll also possibly say your username in a funny voice. Kalina Horning. Why do we choose to sit in the same seat every day in class when there is no assigned seating? What you're referring to is something called situational territoriality, which is kind of a fancy way of talking about our territorial behaviors that we tend to exhibit more often in public spaces. This is something you see happen a lot in classrooms and also in conference rooms. Yet another example of how high school never ends. There was a study conducted on this at the University of Bologna in Italy, which found that yes, indeed, university students are very attached to their unassigned seating. And they found that the reason we beeline for the same seat is so that we don't have to renegotiate our territory, thus avoiding conflict and anxiety. Consider how discombobulating it can be to walk into a classroom and see that someone has taken your seat. You then have to look around, pause, figure out where you're gonna sit and figure out who you're sitting around and maybe ask if it's okay if you take that seat just to reclaim new territory. Now, the follow-up question would then be, does it matter where you sit? Organizational psychologists would probably suggest that in the classroom, yes, there tends to be a correlation between kids who sit closer to teachers and better grades, but it's unclear whether that is simply a correlation, i.e. students who are more engaged and want to do better will sit closer, or if it's more of a causational thing that being closer to a teacher fosters more engagement and more eye contact and communication between students and teachers, which will thus influence how well you perform. While sitting in the back of a classroom might be totally fine while you're in school, don't sit in the equivalent of the back of the classroom when you are in the professional world. Studies have found that employees, and particularly female employees who are closer to the boss, sitting at the table during meetings, tend to be perceived as being more highly engaged, active, having better ideas, being more innovative, etc. So it really does pay off to look good in the boardroom. But now I want to know from you, where is your preferred seat in the classroom? Do you like to get up close and personal in the front row, or maybe hang back a bit? When I was in school, it really depended on the teacher. The more the teacher liked me, the closer that I sat to the front, or the poor that I did in the class. Oh, I hate to admit this, but it also had to do with the placement of boys that I had crushes on. Be sure to ask me your questions so I can give you some answers, regardless of where you're sitting.